Now, the bandwagon, as they say, was getting heavy. Everyone started to jump on the bandwagon again.
Portland is not in a position to try to come back, and he should just kind of leave that alone.
Stop being satisfied with mediocre performances.
I don't like it. Plain and simple, I really don't like it. An all-star game just shows how much they just kind of continue to placate the players and their lackadaisical efforts on the court.
You really sparked my interest, and I'm sure that of many others. Alister, Albert, thank you very much.
Hello and welcome to a new episode of Baseline to Baseline with Alister and Orane. We'd like to welcome you to episode 4. I am Alister Albert, and of course my co-host here with me, Orane Buchanan, over in Jamaica. Welcome to a new episode where we kind of just get into everything really quickly. You know, we have a lot to talk about, a lot of things happening over the NBA the last week, basically. And of course, we want to start off with what's been dominating the news this week. The firing of Nico Harrison, the previous GM of the Dallas Mavericks. You know, he, of course, was responsible, or most people say was responsible. Well, no, he was responsible. He was responsible for the trading of Luka Doncic. Whether or not he had the final say is a different story. But, of course, he was fired this week, you know, because just amidst the uproar and the disappointment of the fans looking at Luka over in LA and everything. And, you know, it was a really difficult situation for them to kind of watch, you know, Luka just going off, averaging 40 points, you know, for a period of time to start this season. The Lakers up in the standings where they are. And of course, you know, they got Cooper Flag. Everyone was really happy and waiting to see what will happen with him. And would this team be potential contenders this year? And it hasn't started off this way, Orane. What do you think about the firing? Do you think it was justified? You know, what did you see from your vantage point on the firing of him?
This one is a tough one. His portfolio says that the releasing of Luka Doncic to the LA Lakers fall under his portfolio. Mm-hmm. That's his job description.
Under his review.
But I don't think Nico Harrison was entirely responsible for that trade. I think he's just being used as a scapegoat, in my opinion, and there are a lot of parts of it. Because we're not talking about a role player. Mm-hmm. We're not talking about the second option or the third option. Mm-hmm. We're talking about a franchise player who they drafted first overall. I think Doncic was first overall pick. You don't just go and release a player of Luka Doncic's stature just like.
Well, Doncic was third or fifth overall, I think, in the
third overall.
The draft.
I don't think people just release players like of that caliber, just like that. Yeah. Nico Harrison is, as I said before, his portfolio says that it falls under his jurisdiction, but there are a lot of persons that had to sign off on that. I don't think that will be a one-man responsibility. Mm-hmm. And that's you're giving up Luka Doncic and then taking Anthony Davis from the Lakers, a player that has been struggling with injuries for the longest while. Mm-hmm. No, there was something more up to that, but I think Harrison was just the man at the center of it to say, you know what, if you know what hits the fan, he will get the X. I just think that's what happened. I mean, he didn't help himself, Alister, because I remember in an interview, Nico Harrison said that he didn't know that the Dallas Mavericks fan base and the Dallas Mavericks basketball community had that love for Luka Doncic. But
yeah, you did.
Where have you been? I mean, do you live outside of the city? Because if I am a basketball fan, I live way in Jamaica, and I can see that this guy is the one having the Dallas Mavericks funny shows like that. You are there, and you can't see that.
And he was.
They'll say even Ray Charles could see that clear as day.
Yeah.
So I don't know what that comment meant. I don't know what he meant by that, because you know you have some leaders. They're very good with pen and paper, keyboard and desktop. But when it comes to public speaking, getting their point across, they come across not the way they intended to. And I think that is what happened with Nico Harrison in that situation. I don't think that's exactly what he wanted to say, that he never knew that Luka Doncic meant this much to the Dallas community. So I think that it was just a foot-in-mouth comment, and it didn't help his case to say, you know what, he wasn't solely responsible. So it's just unfortunate, but they have to pick up the pieces. Doncic is no longer there. He's doing good stuff in LA. So I'm sure LA Lakers are very happy and pleased to have gotten rid of Anthony Davis for Luka Doncic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And the thing about it is, it's really sad. Like you say, it's a bit of a sad situation for him because, you know, this is a guy, he came in, he's trying to do his job. But like you say, you can't really excuse not knowing how deeply entrenched and how much the fan base loved, you know, Luka Doncic. You got brought into the team. You would have done your research, you would think, as to, you know, the caliber of players that you have on your team and everything. Unfortunately, this seems to be like a little bit of a habit for Nico Harrison as well. Of course, if you can remember, if you go back, you know, his Nike days, you know, he had the presentation to Steph Curry to try to keep him on the brand, and he fumbled that, you know, calling him Stephon, and kept a Kevin Durant pitch slide in his presentation deck to Steph Curry. So he has a little bit of a careless streak about him when it comes to preparation, maybe, and the level of research that he needs to do. So that kind of played in it as well, preparation and everything. But I think you're right, you know, in terms of him being the scapegoat, you know, this had to have come from, you know, the top, you know, being able to make that decision. But the thing about that is, and I'm not sure if you consider this perspective, the new coach, that the new owner that came in, that took in the majority stake from Mark Cuban, this guy is not a basketball guy, you know. And when Nico Harrison,
Patrick Dumont.
Pardon?
Patrick Dumont.
Patrick Dumont, yeah, I don't think he doesn't come from a basketball background at all. And you know, when he came in, the team had made the finals. You know, Nico Harrison seems to have been riding high on, you know, being very good as an executive. You know, so I think Shams Charania, the insider for ESPN, has now said, you know, when they made the finals, their relationship was really tight. You know, he was really thinking of Nico Harrison as a savant. He knew what he was doing, so he really trusted, you know, Nico Harrison's judgments and everything. So Nico presented the trade package to him. Nico Harrison said in an interview with Jason Kidd after the trade was made that Patrick Dumont actually laughed at him when he presented the trade idea to him. So I think he himself was not too sure about, you know, that being the right thing, but him not being a basketball person went on with the idea of what Nico was selling, basically. And he then okayed the trade because he's like, you know, championships are going to be one of defense. This guy is not doing what he needs to do. He's not in the shape that he needs to be. And Patrick Dumont, you know, he listened to him, thinking, you know, let's empower this guy to make those sorts of decisions, and I'll sign off on it. So there was a little of naivety, I would say, from the owner who signed off on that. But, you know, he probably should have used some better judgments and realized, this is my cash cow. This is the guy who's been leading my team. I probably should hold back or challenge this a little more. But he, of course, deferred to the expertise, quote unquote, of Nico Harrison, and kind of signed off on that trade. And of course, now they're in a situation. They got the number 1 pick. They brought in Cooper Flagg. Everyone's been waiting to see what's going to happen this year. You know, Stephen A. Smith is out here saying, you know, if this team stays healthy, a very big if this team stays healthy, they could make the finals and everything, and we could see where they are right now. It's just nowhere close to that. So
I think it's two-part, though. I think it's two-part because while you were there speaking, I was thinking, like, how many of the owners are general managers, members of the hierarchy of an NBA team, really knows basketball?
True.
Because what you have in the NBA is that a lot of men, women, because, you know, Genie Boss with the Lakers, they have the money. So if you have the money and a team says, you know what, $1 billion or $2 billion, whatever the price is, you can purchase the team. I mean, you will generate funds.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, how many of the owners in the NBA, other than, say, Steve Ballmer for LA Clippers, Masai Ujiri for the Toronto Raptors, you really see that knows basketball or in tune with the game like that? There are not many. Dallas Mavericks, Patrick Dumont, he's doing something that I saw that I'm seeing with the Phoenix Suns and Matt Ishbia. Matt Ishbia for the Suns knows nothing about basketball, but he has the money.
Right. Well,
Hence the reason why
he'll
when
challenge that.
they
He'll challenge that because he played Division One basketball and all of that. So, but I see what you mean. Yeah.
making
Being clear.
decisions,
Yeah.
because a good player don't necessarily mean a good coach.
True.
Even soccer,
Oh.
football, what you want to call it, a lot of the guys that are very good, that were very good players in their days, didn't make the transition to be managers and coaches.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
that's why I made the point.
Mm-hmm.
Matt Ishbia, when it comes to decision making,
Mm-hmm.
and I've asked her beside his name because from what they did with Bradley Beal, there was
Mm-hmm.
no way a sensible person would sign off on that pitch from his agent to
That's true.
sign Bradley Beal to a no trade clause.
True. True. Very true.
Bradley Beal is a very good player,
Mm-hmm.
but no trade clause, no trade clause for me. That
Mm-hmm.
goes to players like LeBron James, Steph Curry,
Mm-hmm.
Giannis, Nikola Jokic, and you probably can slide in Jason Tatum in that.
Mm-hmm. A handful of players.
Those are the players that I really say have no trade clause. I would say Kevin Durant, but he travels a lot around. So
Mm-hmm.
so back to the point at hand, I think not a lot of those managers are really in tune with certain things.
Mm-hmm.
Hence why they just come with the money and they get the team and they do whatever they want.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that that's the situation. It changes in Dallas because on paper, this team can be very good
True.
if they stay. This team can be very good. The potential that they have, the group that they have, but then you can't put your pot on fire, as they say in the Caribbean, for Anthony Davis.
Yeah. Yeah.
He'll give you 41 nights injured for 2 weeks after. Kyrie Irving, when he's good, he's very good. When he's off mentally or whatever, he's very off. And Klay Thompson, in his situation. So Dallas Mavericks, they have something that can build on, but we don't know. We just have to wait.
All of the players you mentioned there's just so much riding on them, and there's so much uncertainty because of their injury situations. And that's the thing. Like Anthony Davis has only played, I think, 5 games this season, but of course, when on the court, he's been productive, 20 and 10, 50% shooting. But that's what we're saying. He's only played 5 games. He hasn't played very much. Kyrie Irving, of course,
And he's carrying weight.
yeah, exactly. And then, Kyrie Irving, people are waiting. They're saying potentially and allegedly he might be back in January, but they're taking their time. Jason Kidd doesn't want to push him. And, yeah, on paper, it's a really good team. But I think they're in the situation now with the firing of Nico Harrison. There's already trade talk. The vultures are already swirling. Once you see things are happening and things are not going good, everyone wants to kind of pick apart this team. And I think it's probably maybe the right thing for them to do right now. But Anthony Davis and Klay Thompson seem to be on the trading block. That's what seems to be going around at the moment. And if that's the case, that team will be in a rebuild mode. And I think, it's a situation where they'll need to make a decision on Kyrie Irving as well, if you see they decide to go that route, and continue to build around Cooper Flag. But if they were to keep this team, I'm a person that I usually tend to lean heavily on being conservative. And I think, it would be good to see in a basketball sense, see what the team has, let it ride out, and then wait till the end of the season and you kind of make that decision. It would be really good to see, all these guys together and see how good they could go. But, Klay Thompson, speaking about him, he's having the worst career outing ever. In 11 games, only 7 starts. Klay Thompson, not a starter, coming off the bench. That's how horrible he's been playing. 8.5 points, averaging this year, 20.7 minutes a game. That's a career worst. Field goal percentage, 32%, 29% from free. We don't expect these types of numbers from Klay Thompson. This team just seems to be out of a groove, but there's just been so much going on. There must be distractions with everything that's going on organizationally, and then of course personally with the players. So it's something that we'll have to watch out to see how the rest of the season goes. Of course, this is all health dependent, but if they do decide to go the rebuild route, they now have the long, arduous task of now trying to figure out how they kind of build around Cooper Flag. So we're going to look at this closely, and we'll jump back into this conversation as the season progresses, when Anthony Davis is back and maybe Kyrie Irving. So moving on.
But before we move on from that, let me show this one to you.
Yeah.
Is it the injury that's causing the problem to Klay Thompson or his relationship with Megan?
Say that again.
What's the problem with Klay Thompson? Would you say it's the injury that he's had in the past or his relationship with Megan?
That has come up. People have been saying, he seems a little bit distracted and everything. Maybe that's a factor. He's moving around. He's a lot more open on social media. There's speculation. There could be speculation. Klay Thompson might be out of his depth. Who know? Who knows? But he's there. Good for him. He's enjoying his life. Let him enjoy his life. But we'll see what happens. This is an early part of the season, and hopefully he could get his way forward. Jason Kidd just needs to do a little more with these guys. Get them in better positions. I think he's not. I think people were expecting that when Jason Kidd came, he was talking about playing Cooper Flag at point, and I was actually really good with that because every time he's had someone at point, they've done really good. He was the one who kind of let Giannis Antetokounmpo and the Bucks try the point guard position out, and he did really well. You have guys like Jalen Brunson who blossomed under him, Luka Doncic who blossomed under him, and he's trying to do that with Cooper Flag, but it just hasn't worked. So let's see what happens with the Mavericks this season and Meg the Stallion and Klay Thompson. Let's see, how much distractions and everything that goes on with that. The next thing we want to jump into, I want to do something. I'm going to debut a little segment here, which I'm going to call Second Take. For the purposes of a show on ESPN, of course, popular show everyone knows, First Take. On November 6th, there was a little bit of a discussion about DeAndre Ayton and how shocked everyone has been about his production this year. He seems to have a pulse and he seems to be doing really good. I think people forget this boy was a first pick in the draft. Got to the finals, was a very key contributor in that finals run, and has been a very productive center since he's been in the league. He has a little bit of an old school type of game and skill set, but he seems to have survived and been able to produce at a really good rate. The only thing I'd say is, I think the last episode 3, I said I think his rebounding numbers could be up a little more. He's down from his averages. He's averaging now 7.5, and he's usually over 10 rebounds a game in his career. So that needs to come up a little bit. But he seems to be someone that people have forgotten what he can do. What do you think about his role with the Lakers and, with LeBron coming back and everything? Do you see him being able to continue his production as he's been able to do so far?
I understand the concerns, and they're reasonable concerns. DeAndre Ayton, he came in the league, has been solid, but in the past few seasons he has fell off from what we were accustomed to, or what we saw leading up to the finals, during the finals. Ever since he has fell off, I think, for me in the last 2 seasons, he's getting back his feet underneath him, and he's starting to become productive again, playing alongside Luka Doncic and Austin Reeves, who Doncic to Ayton, we'll be hearing a lot about that. That can become something in LA, what we saw in probably the 2004 season with Steve Nash and Amari Stoudemire.
True. That's a good one.
That pick and roll, lob and dunk, Chris Paul, Blake Griffin in their prime at Clippers. This is something that Lakers can get from Doncic at the point, Ayton at the center. Because that's the kind of player he is. I mean, he'll feed, he'll earn a lot more playing alongside Doncic with that style. And I think that's productivity that DeAndre Ayton will have with the Lakers, and this is just the start. I expect more. As you say, the rebounding numbers are a little less than I would want, but I think by the playoffs come around, if the Lakers should make the playoffs, I think those numbers should go higher.
Yeah, and I think what Stephen A. Smith and the guys in First Take were probably thinking about, when he, after the finals run, there seems to have been a little bit of a breakdown in relationship and communication with him and then Coach Monty Williams. I think there was some communication breakdown after he was benched in one of the playoff games, and Ayton was really disappointed and upset with that decision that was made at that time. And their communication from there kind of broke down, and then, he was benched a couple more times in regular season games and all that sort of stuff. So he started to wonder what his place was with the Phoenix Suns and whether or not they were committing to him as a centerpiece for that team. So, he wanted that trade out. I think was there a trade, I think, to the Indiana Pacers at one point, and I think that got pulled back. An offer sheet was something, I believe.
For the Lakers?
No, DeAndre Ayton. I think it was there was a trade offer sheet that was signed to the Indiana Pacers. I
Oh,
think at one point.
oh,
I'll check that. I'll correct that on screen if anything. And then of course he ended up with the Portland Trail Blazers, and where he had a an opportunity, a change of scenery, had an opportunity to kind of do well there, but the team makeup and everything, he didn't have a point guard that was really, gonna dish him the ball as much as he needed to with Scoot Henderson, Anthony Simons, and those guys there. He didn't have a facilitator, and I think he struggled with that. Only played about 47 games for those
yeah.
two seasons on average. So he didn't really get to showcase what he was able to do. But like you say, with a guy like Luka Doncic being able to deliver him the ball, right now he's averaging 67% field goals percentage. That's a career high. That's how open he is. That's how, the lobs he's getting at the rim and everything as much as he has. That's a career year he's having in terms of efficiency. And I think, with LeBron coming back, that is going to that will stay at that peak for him, I believe, because he's going to get opportunities to be open and be someone who's not focused on as much, and then he could feast in the zone. So I think what I wanted to really say about this, based on what we're saying, I think they need to just kind of remember, let's not do the recency bias with him. This is not a guy who has fallen off too much in the sense that he cannot produce. It's just that he probably needed the opportunity, the structure, and the players around him, a point guard specific,
Around him, yeah.
to be able to do that. When he was with Chris Paul, they went to the finals.
Numbers going good, yeah.
So
That's true.
he needs that sort of thing around him. I think, let's give him a chance to prove himself. And so far he's doing that. I think if the Lakers go far, it will not just be Luka and Austin Reeves and maybe LeBron. It will be DeAndre Ayton. I think he's going to put himself in a good position in Laker history if he continues on the path that he has. And the last thing I think we want to discuss here today is, last episode we spoke about the rise of the Chicago Bulls in the East. And, we had this lovely talk about, how good they're doing, but we had some concerns about whether they were pretenders and contenders, and they've shown to be pretenders at the moment. They had a 4-game skid, coming off their lovely 6-1 start, and they're now like 6 in the East or something, no, 9th in the East or something of the sort right now. And that's kind of gone by the wayside. I don't really trust their ability to probably stay at a contending level in the East anymore. The Detroit Pistons, however, from last season, we saw them on the come up, in that playoff round against the New York Knicks. They showed their capabilities. From game 3 onwards, the combined points that they gave up to lose their games was only 6 points. They only lost by 6 points combined in the last 3 games of the last 4 games of their first round series. So it was a close series. It could have gone either way if the outcomes kind of change how it did. I think Cade Cunningham is coming, or he's already here. He's showing how really good he is. And I'm going to make a proclamation right here, and I want to hear what you think. Yeah. The East, of course, is open. Everyone is kind of waiting to see what's going to happen. I know it's really too early to say, but I'm going to stake my claim right here. I think the Detroit Pistons are going to make the finals. What do you think about
NBA finals?
NBA finals.
Or Eastern finals?
NBA finals. I'm going to say that. And the only reason why I say that, of course, the East, everyone's juggling and trying to find position with the injuries and everything. We don't know what's going to happen with Tatum. I think the Boston Celtics have a long way to go. The Milwaukee Bucks, I think, are a very interesting team to watch as they go on. If they make a trade in the trade deadline, they could probably be there as well. But what the Detroit Pistons are doing and JB Bickerstaff are doing, these guys are hungry. JB Bickerstaff wants to prove that he is an elite coach. Cade Cunningham and the whole Detroit Pistons franchise want to not be an afterthought anymore. They're leading the league in 2-point attempts and 2-point makes. They're not playing by the 3. They're attacking the rim. They're really high. I think it's like 2nd in free throw attempts, 3rd in free throw attempts, 2nd in rebounds, 2nd in blocks. They're not taking many threes, and they're just dominating on the inside. I think they're in a position to really give people a lot of problems, and I know it's way too early. It's probably a foolish thing to do right now, but I really believe in what these Detroit Pistons are doing, and I think they could give any team in the East a run for their money, and they could make it to the finals this year.
Oh, well, you're on your own with that. Detroit Pistons.
That's fine. That's fine. No problem. I'll take it.
Check me back by Christmas, and I'll give a bit of assessment of them. But in all seriousness, I love the partnership with Cade Cunningham and Duncan Robinson at the 2 guard. Those that 1 and 2 punch at the guard, they'll feed families because they are going to light up the East, as you say. As I say, is hell. Can this somewhat young team, inexperienced somewhat, gel together with experienced coach? I think they will make a lot of noise in the East. They'll make a lot of noise in the East. I love every single roles. Cade Cunningham, Duncan Robinson, Javonte Green, Ronald Holland, Jalen Green, Jalen Duran at the center.
Jalen Duran, yeah.
Perfect pieces in each role, and each guy understands their role. And if they just grow together, I think they can do very well in the East, to be fair.
But here it is. Okay, think about that roster you just said there. How they play, right? Who do you think could beat this team in a 7-game series? I don't trust. The reason why I put them above the New York Knicks, I don't trust Mike Brown as coach for the Knicks. I think he's going to put them in situations where there's going to be this hindsight sort of thing. Oh, I should have done this or whatever it is. And I know he's trying to do different from Coach Thibodeau, where he's trying to play more players, trying to kind of spread the minutes more evenly and everything. I think that's good. But I think he needs another year to get his playbook in and get the players comfortable with what he wants to do. The Celtics, we know what's happening with the Celtics. The 76ers are playing really well at the moment, but Joel Embiid cannot jump off a curb right now. He's not where he needs to be, and we don't know what's going to happen, as we move along in the season. The Bulls we spoke about. Who else? The Cleveland Cavaliers, I don't trust them. We've seen it over and over again. I don't think Darius Garland as well, his health, will be able to sustain to actually go as deep as they need to, and everything. Every team that I look at and I think about the Detroit Pistons at this moment at least, I cannot see them beating them in a 7-game series. How hungry they're playing and the depth, the skill that they have. Jaden Ivey is not even playing right now. And that's another, explosive guard that they have at their disposal that hasn't been playing. Karis LeVert is on that bench, who is, of course, not an all-star, but he is, capable. He is deep. And I think they're the team. I think my Eastern Conference Finals, if I had to call it now, Milwaukee Bucks, Detroit Pistons goes to the finals. Call me foolish. I know it's too early, but that's what I'm thinking.
Well, good take with that. Good. I mean, to be fair, it's not unreasonable to think that. But I just think that, as they often say, when it's the time comes, the cream always rises to the top. I think the better teams, the longer the season progresses, will gear their season to peak just after All-Star weekend. So just after February, the better teams you see start to come into their own and start to play a better brand of basketball. And I think that's when we'll separate the men from
We'll definitely see that. The Hawks, you don't know what's going to happen to them. Toronto, not really sure about them. The teams just don't seem like they're just surefire options to kind of make it to the front, and I think that's why I'm really looking at the Detroit Pistons to kind of make that step this season to kind of go all the way. But this is what we were going to talk about today. I think this was really good, really short episode. We also have a guest that'll be coming on at the end of this episode. Will be coming in, Bernadette Albert, who's going to be talking about the cultural risk assessment and how this kind of works within the sporting environment. So we're going to go straight into this after this episode. But think about it. Just remember, Detroit Pistons for the finals this year, and we're going to look at, I think people just need to continue to look at DeAndre Ayton. We're going to see what happens when LeBron James comes back and how he kind of fits into that. And of course, everyone is going to keep a very close eye on the Dallas Mavericks to see what they do this year, because this is going to be really, the drama that just continues to give, they've finally given Ja Morant a break. They fired Nico Harrison, and on the spotlight just came off of Ja Morant. He must be really happy for that, because this boy had kind of a lot of stress in the media the last couple of weeks, and we've spoken about him all through the first 3 episodes. So Dallas, thank you very much for giving Ja Morant a little bit of a break. But anyway, thank you for joining us here for this episode. We're going to jump into this interview now with Bernadette Albert. But Orane, thank you very much as usual, and we shall see you next episode. Hello and welcome to this segment of episode 4, where we have our guest, like I mentioned towards the end of episode 4, there with Orane. We have Bernadette Albert here with us, our cultural and inclusion expert, who's going to talk to us a little bit about her book, The Cultural Risk Assessments in Events, Achieving Equality and Diversity. You can get it now on all platforms, all bookstores, Amazon, Waterstones, Goodfellows Publishing, the main publisher and everywhere. Just search for the book, Bernadette Albert, and you'll get more information. But as we go on into this interview, you'll get to find out about it. And why cultural risk and why cultural risk in basketball and baseline to baseline, there is applicability. So that's why we have Bernadette here as an expert to talk to us about it. Of course, when you saw in episode 1, we had an expert come in for the medical field. And as we continue on throughout the season, we're going to have interviews with experts and people, who are relevant to the different fields that are going to contribute to our conversation in basketball. Of course, Bernadette is from the Caribbean as well, born in the UK, raised in St. Lucia, and of course, that's what our regional connection is. So very quickly, I'm going to do a really quick rundown of her extensive CV, but it's really useful to know what her background is. She was the aide-de-camp to the Governor General of St. Lucia. That was for 10 years. Event manager at the International Council for Coaching Excellence during the London 2012 Olympics. So she has sport experience, like I mentioned. She was a technical consultant to the government of St. Lucia on a number of stints for a number of different projects and reasons. Senior lecturer and course leader at Leeds Beckett University for over 16 years. And she also lectured globally, Qatar, Europe, states in the States, Caribbean, throughout the region, etc. So she has a lot of experience teaching people and educating people on event management, which was her speciality, but also she was on a number of cultural committees as a lead advisor for the university as well. Also, she was the chief exec of her own consultancy, EEDIQ Limited, and she is now the EDI and cultural awareness specialist for West Yorkshire Police here in the UK. But also, and once, of course, like I said, extensive background, extensive CV. But like I said, so she's a co-author of this book, and also many others, which we'll get to as we go through. And also a soon-to-be autobiographical author, musician, and producer. So, Bernadette, thank you for taking some time to join me here today on Baseline to Baseline with Alister and Orane.
Thank you for having me.
Really happy to have you on. So, like I said in the introduction, culture. When you think about culture or cultural risk or event management, you're not really thinking basketball. So, it's not the easiest link, but stay with us. She's she's done that, like I said. Thinking about culture in sports, of course, you tend to think about team culture, like we said, maybe work ethic and chemistry. So how would you use the cultural risk assessment, which is part of this book, to help with building a team, understanding their culture, and be able to apply that within a sporting context?
Well, before I even get to how I would use a cultural risk assessment, let me tell you a little bit about what it is. The book itself is cultural risk in events, but cultural risk is applicable across a multiplicity of sectors. It's not just confined to events. We live in a society where culture is the foundation of everything we do. Culture in its most simplistic terms is the way of life of a people, or just the way of life. And how we think about culture is in two kind of in a dichotomy or in two perspectives. There's a culture that's very visible that you can see, which is about 10%. It's like an iceberg, and then there's the 90% that sits under the surface. We are very much aware of the 10% that's visible. We know what it is. We can identify it, symbols, artifacts, uniforms, and specifically on the court, branding. These are all things that are very visible. But when you dig below the surface, then you're beginning to get very nuanced things like behavioral expectations, unsaid culture that's not discussed in the on the court or within culture itself. Sure. So the cultural risk assessment was designed to identify some of the risks that not understanding culture brings, because it can have a significant detrimental impact on any environment that people have to navigate. So the idea that the book is specifically events based, if we think of life as an event, everything we do is an event, then it's applicable across the board. So recognizing that the cultural risk assessment identifies the preferences of particular groups of people, then identifies how that can impact in terms of become risk, and then you work towards mitigating that risk.
Okay.
Yeah. And I think that's really important to understand about cultural risk. It's amazing that this hasn't been developed before. There are things like people impact assessments and that sort of thing, but across the board, nobody's really looked at cultural risk and the impact of cultural risk, and that's what the book does. That's what the team, myself and my co-authors Ruth Dowson and Dan Lomax, have actually looked at. DEI has become a taboo word across multiple spaces, and I'm not going to hone in really on that, but diversity has been around. The idea of diversity and including diverse groups of people, or bringing diverse groups of people together, that's been around for the past 60 years. So if you don't have diverse organizations, you're about 60 years behind the curve. So the cultural risk assessment moves on from that, and it looks at how do you create inclusive environments. One of the key phrases of the book is inclusion via exclusion is not a strategy to inclusion.
Can you tell us about that?
Yeah, the tendency is with DEI work is we identify a particular characteristic and then we cater to that particular characteristic. So whether it's gender or LGBTQ plus issues or race or ethnicity, religion, we cater to that. So we'd be like, oh yeah, okay, well, we've got this religious group, we're going to do that. The shift in the cultural risk assessment is how do we create inclusive spaces for everyone?
So that's really important point, because when you think about teams, especially thinking about the NBA, as we tend to talk about NBA teams, a lot of teams try to cater to one personality or their leader.
Yeah.
And teams get skewed to trying to make sure that that main person is sorted. So you're saying using the cultural risk assessment, you could kind of understand that, but making sure you could include other personalities and diverse characteristics, etc.
Absolutely. So you're transitioning from identifying individual unique characteristics, and you're creating space where everybody can flourish and thrive and feel a sense of belonging and feel included and operate at their maximum and navigate the space that they inhabit in a way without encountering barriers that may come because of those identifying characteristics.
Okay.
So it's flipping kind of, identifying who the group is and then going, we're going to cater to that group, to no, we're going to cater to everyone. So everybody can just walk into the space and maximize the potential that they have, maximize the way that they navigate the space and minimize the barriers. So the cultural risk assessment identifies barriers and then attempts to minimize them.
Okay.
How does this play out in basketball? Very, very interestingly, or in sport generally, we understand that people come with their individual cultures, but there is a whole cultural ecosystem that supports sport,
right?
And in particular basketball. So you talk about the culture of the individual, you talk about the culture of the team, you talk about the culture of the organization, you talk about the culture of the city that they're in, you talk about the culture of the country or that they are from, you talk about the culture of the country that they may be going to play in. These are all ecosystems, cultural ecosystems that influence the game.
Right.
We always look at it on the most basic level of you have individual culture. I come from a particular background and ethnicity. I'm of a particular race. I have a particular religion. But actually, there's a whole cultural ecosystem that supports that player when they get onto that court.
Which is interesting, because one of the examples, like as you're speaking there, one of the things I was thinking about is when the NBA comes over to Europe and comes to the UK, like we've been. So, if for those who don't know, of course, Bernadette is my wife, and when we were courting in the early stages of our relationship, and we still do that anyway. We still go to basketball games, but when the NBA was coming over a lot more frequently, we went to a couple of games, and one of the things you'd notice when the games were going on in the UK was the culture of the NBA and how they entertain the crowd is unlike anything Europeans are used to, especially the UK crowd. We have a very loud and very strong football culture, but the pyrotechnics, the cheerleaders and everything is not something that many game people are used to. And you could see the culture of the NBA within that space, where the crowd sometimes, of course, they're interacting and reacting with what's going on, but you could kind of feel the slight difference in what it is. So it's understanding, I suppose, the NBA, and in this sense trying to understand the host countries that they're coming to and being able to cater for that appropriately. So
this tentative nature that British people have is part of their culture.
Yeah.
It's deeply embedded. It sits below the surface of the iceberg. That if you ask an English person, what is your culture? They'll give you some very surface level things. They'll tell you fish and chips, pub culture, queuing. This is something that, British people are known for, queuing and politeness and keep calm and carry on. But actually, if you dig beneath the surface of that, you come to recognize that actually in sport or in basketball, the term culture doesn't just sit with internal chemistry of the team.
True.
It plays out consistently across the NBA, the basketball ecosystem.
Within the team,
and that is where the cultural risk assessment actually becomes useful. When cultural risk goes unmitigated, you're not going to maximize the potential of the team, whether it's on an individual level, on a team level, on an organizational level, through the perspective of the fans, through media, because of course different people engage very differently with different types of media because of their culture. And the book itself identifies the different facets of culture, and we talk about things like high context and low context cultures. And just to give you an example of this, is that where some cultures we're on a first name basis. If I meet you, it's like, hey, I'm Al. Whereas you are the CEO of the NBA, and in another country, it'd be like, I could never call you Al. I would have to call you Mr. Albert or CEO or Sir, or something like that. And even navigating even those kind of business environments as well for the NBA becomes very critical, because it isn't just what happens on the court. It's all of the stuff that happens in the background, the financial elements of it, the business elements of it. How do we identify people that we can bring onto the team, and how do we mitigate their cultural risk? And a good example, and like, you were saying, I've picked up vicariously some stuff from you. So you think of somebody like Giannis Antetokounmpo, who's a person of African heritage, who grew up in Greece and then moved to the US to play basketball. His work ethic is probably going to be very different to somebody who is, say, from African American from the US, or a European, or a Chinese person, and recognizing that he comes with that, and how that is going to impact the team in terms of his discipline levels, of how he approaches things, that can bring cultural conflict in the team, and the team can fail to gel properly. You can mitigate that by identifying that before he comes, well, we know that his background is very different. How is he going to relate? Because again, and within the NBA, and if you're African American, I am assuming that socialization and the socialization aspect of it is quite important. And you may come from a background or a culture where if we're here to work, we're here to work. This isn't about fun and games. And actually, I come with a lot more in terms of my family structure, my responsibility to my family, the expectations. So recognizing this, we can support individuals within teams, within organizations, to maximize the benefit.
And that's really interesting. And that's a great example that you brought up. Giannis being from African descent, Nigerian descent, like you said, had a really, tough upbringing, from there, moving from there, I think, to flee wars and some of the disturbances in that country, moving over to Greece. And, he had a very, tough upbringing, sharing shoes with his brother to try to, be able to play basketball, to be able to play, to just have the gear and everything, sharing and everything. So he comes from a very close-knit, tight family background, and wanting to give back to his family, and not taking anything for granted. Coming to the US, of course, him joining the team, it was, of course, he's coming in as a rookie. Nobody knows him. He's not a big name that anyone knows. So he kind of had to assimilate. But now that, all the years have passed, he's won an MVP, he's won a championship. Now the team takes on his persona, his culture, his work ethic, because he's the leader, undisputably, of the Milwaukee Bucks. So now you need to kind of create a team that fits, the chemistry and the work ethic of that person. But like you say, you want to do that, but you also want to cater for other people coming in. So you want to try to do that using a risk assessment in that sort of way.
And absolutely, and I'll throw something in there which may be a bit controversial. Teams are not one person. So even though you have your most prominent player and your MVP, the MVP can't play the game on his own.
That's true.
So if you have other people in the team who feel like they are not included, you are going to struggle.
But that's where the general managers and the coaches need to be able to identify the right people to come into the team, the right personalities, the right mindsets, the right work ethic to kind of create a very strong and cohesive team chemistry that would allow them to do good.
So selecting the right people. No, because you people come with their culture.
True.
How do you identify the culture and then adapt the environment that the team operates in to mitigate those cultural differences so they do not cause cultural conflict on the court, in the team? Because sometimes, this idea that, the team's not gelling, and I hear you sit there a lot and go, they brought this person in and something not right there. if you think about a person's culture, it isn't just about their play style. It isn't, because the individual comes with all of these cultural aspects, and they're coming into a new culture, and they've come from a team that may be culturalized in a particular way.
Sure.
They may come into a leadership that is culturalized in a particular way. So unless you're aware of what the culture is, which is why we do the cultural risk assessment, but there's a broader there's a more extensive risk assessment that can be done, which is the cultural inclusion and equity risk assessment, which is a much more lengthy process, which does a deep dive on the organization, on the team, on the leadership, to then identify actually, well, what is the culture, inclusivity, and equity of the organization? How does it approach it? And then you strategically develop a new methodology to maximize the team potential based on the culture of the team. Maybe you need to shift cultures because the culture that the organization has does not cater to the team that is playing for it, and vice versa. But unless you're aware of that culture, then you can't really do anything about it.
So first, it's being able to identify it and then know what to do about it. So one of the examples, I think, and before we move on to the next question, is when you think about culture. Once you hear culture in the NBA, the team you tend to think of is the Miami Heat. Of course, Pat Riley is the guy at the top. He's not the owner of the team, but, he basically runs this team, basketball operations, draft, making trades, etc. And then he has, his protege under him in Eric Spoelstra, who's kind of taken on that very strict, no-nonsense culture about them in that team. So when they try to bring in people, one of the things that's been said very much about the Miami Heat is, you need to be under a certain body fat. You need to be able to come into training at or practices at certain times. Coming in late is not allowed. And of course, you'd expect that from most teams, but they enforce it in a very strict way to make sure that the culture remains really strong and people stay in line. It doesn't matter if you're the best player or not, you stick within the culture that we're trying to set. So the Miami Heat are very synonymous with culture in the NBA. And I think it's then trying to understand how people fit within that. Another good team for that is the Golden State Warriors. You have Steph Curry, who's a very mild-mannered, very soft-spoken kind of guy, but the team has taken on a very chemistry-focused construction where the new GM Mike Dunleavy, he made it very clear that team chemistry is what his focus in making trades and everything, trying to find the right guys to fit in the group to kind of get to where they want to get to.
I mean, just to give a one-liner on that, you can't build chemistry if you don't understand the culture in the room.
That is true.
Because chemistry and talent brings a team together, but culture will break it faster than any bad game played on the court.
So who should set the culture? Should it be the owner? Should it be the general manager, the CEO? What would be the right person to set culture?
So bearing in mind, right. So there are multiple levels of culture,
right?
And you're thinking strategically at the top. Leadership has to have a particular culture,
right?
And that has to filter down through the organization. But you have to also understand what the culture is of the individuals in the team that you're selecting, and what the culture of the team is. So that when individuals come in the team, you can literally say, right, so Antetokounmpo, we know that he's disciplined and he's not going to have problems with showing up on time. What he may have issues with is all the social aspects of it, the media aspects of it, because maybe he's not, from his culture, it's like, I'm just going to come and get my job done. I don't want to be speaking to the media. And therefore, you then have to be able to support him in understanding that we get that this is not something that you want to do, but this is why we do it, and this is part. So an awareness as well is very, very important, because no culture is better or worse than another. It's just the individual's preference, or the organization's preference, or the fans' preference. So you cater to the preference if you want to maximize the output. But what we have a tendency to do is we go into places and go, this is my culture is better, and therefore you're going to do what I want you to do. And sometimes that's not beneficial, because the individual who's coming has a very different culture, and if they're not aware of their culture and you are not acutely aware of yours, because when you ask people what's your culture and they say queuing, and you go, why do you queue? I don't know, that's just what we do. So not understanding why you do what you do is also problematic. So it's from the strategic level all the way down, but there are different layers of culture that you can engage with to understand how to maximize anything that you're doing in the organization, from a strategic leadership level down to the fans, because if there are no fans, there is no game, because who are you playing for? How do you market to those fans? What is the merchandise going to be like? Because fashion is also, culture. So if we're in a particular country, how do we maximize our merchandise to align with the culture of that country? And these are the sorts of things that people don't think about, because we go, yeah, we've got basketball shirts and we're just going to go with it, and people like it or they don't like it. But actually, if you then cater to something or provide merchandise that is more synonymous with the culture, you're likely to sell more.
Right. Okay, that makes sense. And I think that's, quite a lot of pointers here for teams in building in NBA, any other, league around the world. Listen to what she's saying there. This is really important in being able to not just maximize what you do on the court, but to maximize your business efficiency, your business commercial prowess and everything. And, understanding culture and being able to cater to that is really important. So we're going to move on to the next question here. And I think one of the things which is really important about this book, you develop, we live in the UK, what some people will consider a first world country or a first world environment, where you deal with a global set of people, lots of different races, very diverse in the cultures that are around. But of course, we're from the Caribbean, and this is a Caribbean skewed, a focused conversation for baseline to baseline. We talk about that. So thinking about the global environments that you've kind of worked in and creating a book that probably tries to understand those global perspectives and try to make things a little clearer for people, how would the cultural risk assessment work in a Caribbean environment, which is more probably skewed towards the minority, quote unquote, being the majority? You have, teams that are being built in the Caribbean. Should we just focus on talent? Should we just be focusing on other elements of culture to bring people into the team? For FIBA, what I'll say here really quickly is for international teams, certain teams are allowed to naturalize players from other countries to bring into the team to fill the talent gaps that they might have. So here you're speaking about bringing people from other places to play for your team. How do you think within the Caribbean context would the cultural risk assessment work in team building or management of basketball teams or any sport teams within the Caribbean?
Okay, so first of all, there is this assumption that Caribbean people are synonymous and one homogeneous group.
Right.
We know that it's incorrect. We are colonized by different people. We are African diaspora in some instances. We have the Asian diaspora. We have the European diaspora. Already, from an island perspective, we are very nuanced, and we're seeing, all the cohesion and everything with one Caribbean and all of that. But we know if you are a St. Lucian, you're different to a Jamaican, you're different to a Trini. Yes, there are things that we have in common, but also there are the nuances of the culture. So that's really important. So depending on the legacy of colonization as well, that's embedded in the culture. How we engage with first world countries is a political culture. So and how we strategize as well. And the output that we want would be very different from island to island. So we challenge the assumption that we are all the same, because we're not. So that's the first assumption. So if you are recruiting from the Caribbean, say you're in the US and you're an NBA team and you're recruiting from the Caribbean, the assumption is, it's a Caribbean, he's from the Caribbean. It's the same. And we have to go from that first position though. The second counterpoint is shared ethnicity can hide risk. So we do have the same culture and the same ethnicity, but actually there's risk in that as well, because it's easy for us to relate to each other because of our unconscious bias. So if we bring somebody new in who's of a different culture and a different ethnicity, our unconscious bias will help us gravitate towards somebody who is like us and who is culturalized like us, and we may not isolate other people who don't look like us. So that's the second thing, that even within an island,
don't look like us, but just from another country altogether.
So our unconscious bias, and I mean, I'm not going to go into that. Maybe that's a whole other interview. But the idea that we are programmed to gravitate towards people who are like us, just neurologically, because the whole point of our brains is to navigate the world with simplicity. And therefore, if I come across a St. Lucian and I'm in a room of Trinis and Jamaicans, chances are I'm gonna gravitate towards the St. Lucian, because we know instinctively, if I said to you AA, which is 2 letters, depending on my intonation, you would know the meaning of the AA. If I'm talking to a Jamaican who maybe doesn't use that as a phrasing, then I have to then explain what AA means, or I have to find. So the idea that we gravitate towards people. So then this idea of similarity is also risk, because we gravitate towards people who are like us. Whereas the benefit may be to people who are not like us, because diversity is we all bring something different. And from a Caribbean perspective, we have a tendency to go, this is how I play. I'm the coach. This is how I play. And I'm familiar with that. So unconsciously, my bias, I'm going to go for Lucian. I'm going to go for somebody who maybe plays in the way that I think is the best way. So understanding that cultural risk element, that I come with bias and therefore my bias can influence my decision making, is very important.
I think why I raise that point specifically is we're seeing now in the Caribbean a lot of teams that are bringing in the players from the NBA who are born in the US, but have Caribbean parentage,
right,
and they're wanting to play for their home team. So you have Jamal Murray and Norman Powell, the Thompson twins, the guys, for example, in Jamaica, they were born in the US, but they want to come to home to play for Jamaica. So they're coming with their US skewed or US in influence culture to Jamaica. And of course, they're coming from that parentage, so maybe they understand certain things, but there's still an adaptability that needs to happen within the team to cater for what they're used to in the US. So that's one of the things I'm guessing you're trying to identify here.
Yeah, so the idea that because you are of the culture does not mean you are from the culture.
Right.
Or because you are from the culture doesn't mean you're of the culture.
Right.
And the idea of a Jamaican American or a Jamaican British person is very, very different from a Jamaican who was born and bred in Jamaica. True. Because you're also American. And this dichotomy of cultures as well has a significant impact on the play, on the game, on your levels of authority and how you respect authority and your work ethic, and whether you have been privileged in ways that other people haven't been privileged. So these are the sorts of things that come into play. And a team can go very wrong if you've got people coming in that think things are standard, playing with people who have not had what these other people have had, And I think that's really, really important, because as well, it's recognizing that we all come with different things, but how do we cater to maximize the benefit of those different things? And that's what diversity is all about.
And of course, with that, there's benefits from that. You learn from people from other cultures or where they come from. Yeah. And, these guys coming from the NBA will bring the skill, the experience, and the tutelage and knowledge to, our Caribbean teams. So, it's really good to be able to learn from people in that way. So, we've spoken a good bit about, what you could expect in terms of cultural risk and everything. And when you think about sports are events. So, this says the cultural risk assessment in events. But it's about anything, like Bernadette said, in work environments, anything that you put on and etc. And within this book, there are quite a lot of case studies for different sectors and industries. So I was lucky enough to be asked to do one from the sporting perspective, and I did a little talk about how the culture was impacted during the Colin Kaepernick situation in the NFL. So there are quite a lot of different case studies. What other case studies could people expect from this?
There are lots of international case studies, and they range everything from political to festivals to sport, to communities, to religion.
So it could cater to quite a lot of different environments.
It's advanced, but when we think of the cultural risk assessment, it isn't just about events, it's about every aspect of life. And that's really, really important to recognize as well. We've had discussions, the authors have had discussions about how do we do, maybe we could do one for cultural risk in basketball or in sport, cultural risk in corporate, cultural risk in politics.
But you've done that because you worked with the England Cricket Board and used some of the tenets in this to try to understand cultural risk.
Yeah, so the idea that the project that we worked on was assessing spaces, physical spaces, where and it was cricket grounds, and how inclusive are the spaces. Right. So if people of different characteristics and different cultures walk into the space, how easily can they navigate the space? Because people feel comfort, value, and belonging in spaces where they don't have to be, identified. Well, I'm a Muslim person, or I'm a disabled person, or I'm an LGBTQ plus person, or a transgender person. I don't want to just be able to walk into a space and
just want to be.
I just want to be. Yeah. And so what we did was we went into these venues and looked at these venues to see how they catered for inclusion. And that's really important as well for stadiums, for spaces. You have a sports stadium, people coming in. How do you get diversity in? People who may never want to come and see a basketball game, how do you get them into the stadiums to see the space? And I think that's really important as well. So it isn't just, and I mean, we can't reiterate enough, it says events. And if we classify everything that happens in your life as an event, then this takes into
you do
consideration.
birthday parties, you do christenings, you do Christmas, gatherings, anything that you do in life could be constituted as an event. So you take the risk factors into that and you try to mitigate against it, like Bernadette is saying. If someone wanted to find out a little more about what you do with the cultural risk assessment, they would like to bring you in to try to understand their culture, whether it be you or any of the other authors, how could someone contact you or to do something?
So very simple. You could email EDIQ limited at gmail.com, not EEDIQ, it's EDIQ limited at gmail.com. Pop me an email. Also, I'm available on LinkedIn, Bernadette Albert. If you just seek me out and send me a message on LinkedIn, I'll be more than happy to have a conversation about what it is you're looking for, because again, it's such a diverse area, it's such a broad area that you can approach culture from lots of different angles, and that's really important.
And I think there's talk about a website development as well for that, so people will be able to get to that and we'll be able to put that out as soon as that is. We're going to switch very quickly here to the last thing we wanted to talk about with Bernadette, something a little more fun. Like I said, you're in music, you've sung, you've produced, you've done background vocals, you've done all sorts of different things in your life. So in addition to your academic and professional experience, you've done a lot of performance stuff as well from a very young age to where you are right now. So right now, like I think I mentioned in the opening, you're kind of writing this autobiographical account of your life, and you're doing different things, and you have a really cool concept of how you want to do that with music and everything as well. Not just the book, but adding music to that as well. When that time comes and she's ready to publish, you'll get more details on that. We're not going to give any details on that specifically. But what you've taken to do now recently, and I've seen it, I hear it every day in the house, is music, and you're producing music and everything. And what you were able to do was to produce a little jingle for Baseline to Baseline with Alister and Orane. And what I want to do right now is to allow Bernadette to just play it really quickly. It's really short. Listen to it. You're gonna hear a little more of it after it. So this is the debut of this little jingle for Baseline to Baseline with Alister and Orane. And here we go.
Breaking down the stats every fan should know. Trace, place, legends in the making. Every headline, no mistaking. Fast breaks, crossovers, highlight reels. What's real strategy, what's hype and feels. East to west, we call it straight. From draft night buzz to finals fade. Baseline to baseline, we cover it all. Big plays, bold takes the rise and the fall. Baseline to baseline, where passion is prime. Your NBA breakdown every single time. Baseline to baseline, we cover it all. Big plays, bold takes the rise and the fall. Baseline to baseline, where passion is prime. Your NBA breakdown every single time.
It's a lovely little catchy song. Baseline to Baseline. You're going to probably hear that a lot more from us now on Instagram and all the other social media channels that we have. How did that song come about, or how did your musicality and production bit come about, and how did this song come about? So just very briefly, because we're going to end up really soon.
Just briefly, I mean, I've always sung. I grew up in a very musical household in the UK. My grandmother was an opera singer. She played the piano. We were all required to play an instrument. I picked up my voice from my grandmother. My mum was tone deaf. She could not sing for her life. She played several instruments. And I think as I have grown in my life, every time I encounter challenges or something is amazing to me, I used to write songs about it. And so I've always performed. I've performed since the age of 7. I've been in theatre as well. I went to dance school. And so this has always been part of my life. I think as I've begun to mature more, I've dipped in and out of it a bit, but I've really struggled with producers and getting people to get the sound that I want. And now we have the technology where you can sit down and you can produce your own music, and you can do it yourself, and you can edit it, and you can then take it to a studio and get it recorded. But you don't even have to go to studio anymore. I have equipment in the house that I can record vocals on the equipment. And so technology has advanced to a degree where it's like, okay, now I know what I want it to sound like. This particular track, which I was just sitting there and I'm like, oh, it needs a jingle. Because you relaunched Baseline to Baseline, you got a soundtrack, and I'm like, oh yeah, it's really good. It's just music, but can we not get a jingle for Baseline to Baseline? And
the song she's alluding to, of course, developed by Chrisville Beats. You can see him at Chrisville Beats on Instagram, and sung by a guy friend of mine, Counterflow, who has a song on that track as well, Dance. So that's the song, that's the title track that opens up the podcast. But we have this jingle now we will incorporate into what we do as we move forward. So,
and I think it's really important. It has a Caribbean flavor. I sing all genres of music, so I sing everything from jazz to contemporary to R&B to soul to neo soul. But this particular one, it was quite fun because it's very short, and a lot of the time you're writing full length songs, verse chorus, outro, intro, pre-chorus, and all of that. And this one was like, okay, what does he talk about all of the time? So I listen in and I watch the videos and I'm kind of like, oh yeah, let me just pull out a few bits and pieces, keywords and buzzwords that he says all the time, and I don't necessarily understand them. I don't have my hand up for that. But hopefully the jingle will be catchy and people will be, if nothing else, people will be going around singing baseline to baseline and that sort of thing. So that's the hope, and it will help as a marketing tool as well, because neurology and bias, of course, I'm imprinting people with baseline to baseline. So.
Just be hearing this in their head and be like, no, I need to go listen to the podcast or something.
Yeah, so those songs that stick, that you hum around the house. That's what I was trying to achieve, and hopefully I've done that.
Awesome. So Bernadette, I really want to thank you for coming on with us today. You provided a lot of insight into cultural risk assessments, and just the environment of not just sports but all sorts of industries, and how we could kind of look at culture as not something that could limit or isolate us, but something that we could use to bring people together, create teams, and kind of get more effective operationalization of people and effectiveness from people when you bring people in together, understanding their differences, catering to it, and being able to maximize their skills as we go along. So like we said, you could get the book, the Cultural Risk Assessments and Events, on any sort of online bookshop that you could find. This is what it looks like.
I'd just like to add, if you like, follow and share Baseline to Baseline, we can get you a discount. You will get sent a discount code where you can get, I think it's 15% off the book, for anybody who likes, shares, and follows Baseline to Baseline.
Awesome, sounds good. So I should probably employ her onto the team. She's here doing some promotion for me. So so that's the cultural risk assessment. But also, like we said, she's an author. She co-authored another book. This is the Event Planning and Management Principles, Planning and Practice. This was the last book that was released, and there's a fourth edition coming out.
I think in March of next year.
Right. Okay.
And then shameless plug on the autobiographical book that I'm writing. It's based on my life, which is a true story, which reads like fiction. So that's going to be launched, and I'm gonna really throw it out there. June next year, the book will be available for purchase on all platforms. I'm self-publishing, and so and it makes for an interesting read. I'm writing it, and it's an interesting read from the perspective of culture, from the perspective of inclusion, from the perspective of othering, and heritage and ethnicity and all those things that come into play as us as human beings, the triumphs and the tribulations, but overcoming in the end, and that's really what it is.
The Alberts are a talented bunch.
We are.
We have a little one coming up who's doing the same sort of thing. So so it's really good. So like she said, you could get these books on any or online shop platform, and like she said, follow Baseline to Baseline. You might be able to get a discount code for that. Just send a DM, if you would like a copy of the book, and we'll be able to try to see if we could sort that out for you. So thank you. This is the end of this episode 4, which included, of course, the first section with Orane and myself talking as we did, and Bernadette, of course, who jumped in to have a really good conversation with us. Pardon the little pings. I have a little bit of some instant messaging going on. But, really happy that Bernadette was able to join us. Like I said, when I did the interview with Edmund Regis, my nephew, I said this is not nepotism. This is me bringing expertise on to talk about the specific topics and disciplines that these people are experts in. And I thought, understanding culture and basketball would be really good. So I have an expert right there in the house. Why not have her on as a guest? So that's what it is. So I'd like to thank you for watching Baseline to Baseline episode 4. You could find us now on Apple Podcasts, that is now live. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, Instagram. Just search Baseline to Baseline with Alister and Orane. And of course, Bernadette Albert, your Instagram handle is?
If you need me, just go to Baseline.
Baseline to Baseline. Yeah, true. That's probably the best way to do it. Bernadette Albert on LinkedIn, like she said, if you want any more information for the book. And we go from there. So thank you for watching, and we'll kind of close out with the song playing in the background right now. Baseline to Baseline.
Yeah. Breaking down the stats every fan should know. Trades, plays, legends in the making. Every headline, no mistaking. Fast breaks, crossovers, highlight reels. What's real strategy, what's hype and feels. East to west, we call it straight. From draft night buzz to finals fade. Baseline to baseline, we cover it all. Big plays, bold takes the rise and the fall. Baseline to baseline, where passion is prime. Your NBA breakdown every single time. Baseline to baseline, we